Christmas is a holiday that's been around for thousands of years, having its origins in ancient midwinter festivals, before merging with Christian tradition sometime around the 4th century AD. The word Christmas clearly contains the word Christ, the title given to Jesus as Messiah of Christianity. This word came through Old English from Latin, in turn borrowed from ancient Greek Christos, meaning the anointed one, from the verb krio, to smear or to anoint. The Greek noun is a calque of the biblical Hebrew Mashiach, from the verb mashach, meaning to anoint with oil. This is related to the Aramaic word Mashiach, from which we get the word Messiah. The Mass of Christmas refers to Christian Mass, thus meaning the Mass of Christ, which came through Old English and Old French from the late Latin word missa. This is the feminine singular of missus, the past participle of mittere, to send, as used in the phrase ite missa est, meaning go, the dismissal is made, which was spoken at the end of Roman church services. Missa was likely reinterpreted as a noun, leading to the present word. The word Christmas is often seen abbreviated as Xmas. Although this may feel like a modern abbreviation, it's actually been around for hundreds of years. First used in late Old English or early Middle English, around the late 11th or early 12th centuries, the X is not actually an X. It's actually the Greek letter chi, abbreviated from the ancient Greek word for Christ. This letter made a k sound, which is romanized as either kh or ch, hence why Christ starts with these letters in English. As mentioned, Christmas took over in many ways from the earlier midwinter festivals. For the Germanic peoples, including the Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, this festival was Yule. This is a word which is still used in some languages, and even within some circles of English speakers. It comes from the Old English Yule, from Proto-Germanic Jachlan, meaning celebration. It isn't known where this word comes from, but one of its other descendants, Old Norse Yule, is thought to be the source of Old French jolif, from which we get the word jolly. Winter is another word we get from Germanic. It comes to us through Middle English and Old English winter, from Proto-Germanic windrus. Yet again, it isn't known for sure where this is from, but the prevailing theory is that it's related to Proto-Indo-European wodr, and in turn Proto-Germanic wator, therefore meaning the wet season. The original Proto-Indo-European word for winter was geum, from the root of which we get Latin hiemps, Russian zima, and Welsh geav. Of course, you can't have a Merry Christmas without merry, a word which comes from the Old English myrie, meaning pleasant, enjoyable, or sweet. This comes from the Proto-Germanic murios, or murgus, brief or slow, from Proto-Indo-European murgus, from which comes the Latin word brevis, the ancestor of the English word brief. The Old English myrie is also the source of mirth, using the same suffix as in wealth, health, theft, filth, and many more. One word with a suffix related to this one is gift, which fits in well with the theme of Christmas. Here, the th of the Proto-Germanic word has been changed into a t due to the influence of the f before it. It can be traced back to the Proto-Germanic riftis. The suffix isn't actually exactly the same as that of mirth, but is related to it. The element to which this is added is the verb revono, to give, so a gift is thus something which is given. In English, a word synonymous with gift is present, although this comes from a very different source. While gift is Germanic, present came to us as a verb through Old French from the Latin verb praesentare, to show, which is derived from the present participle of the verb praesere, literally a compound of prae, before, and essere, to be. Present therefore means that which is shown or presented. Today, Father Christmas, Santa Claus, and St. Nicholas are all considered to be synonyms for the same figure. In the past, however, they were distinct. Father Christmas is a traditional English folklore figure, the personification of Christmas. He was used by the Cavaliers in the English Civil War during the time when Christmas was banned by Oliver Cromwell. St. Nicholas of Myra was a bishop from 4th century Greece, known for his generosity. On the evening before his name day, of the 6th of December, children were given gifts. Nicholas is of course Greek, from the ancient Greek Nikolaos, a compound of Nike, victory, and Laos, populous. Santa Claus is from Dutch Sinterklaas, which in Middle Dutch was a compound of Sint, Saint, and Klaas, a shortened form of Niklaas, therefore also meaning St. Nicholas. Father Christmas, according to the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, has 9 reindeer: Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, Blitzen, and Rudolph. Dash comes from a Scandinavian language, with the original meaning of to beat or to strike, as in dash to pieces. Dance comes from Old French dancier, from West Germanic thonsorn, meaning to pull. Prance is from Middle English, probably from Old Dutch or another West Germanic language, but is probably related to words in High and Low German such as prunken, prangen, and pracht. A vixen is a female fox, from Old English fixen, from Proto-Germanic fuchsini, the feminine form of fuchsos, fox. A comet is an icy body which orbits wide around the sun. We get the word from Latin, from the ancient Greek aster cometes, meaning star with long hair, in reference to a comet's famous tail. Cupid was a Roman love god. His name in Latin was Cupido, meaning desire. This comes from the verb cupere, to desire. Donner and Blitzen are from the German and Dutch words for thunder and lightning. In the poem, Donner was originally Donder, the Dutch word for lightning, while Blitzen more resembles the German word, although the influence of both languages can be seen. Finally, Rudolph, the famous red-nosed reindeer, wasn't actually mentioned in the poem. It's a German name, from the Proto-Germanic name Hrothulfos, which is composed of the elements Hrothis, glory, and Wulfos, wolf. Reindeer itself is a word which entered English from Old Norse, Reindyri, composed of the elements rein, itself meaning reindeer from Proto-Germanic Hroinos, and dyr from Proto-Germanic Deusen, the source of English deer and German Tier. The Old Norse displaced the native Old English word hron, which is cognate to the first element of the Old Norse. In modern English, the rain element appears to have no meaning of its own, which in linguistics is known as a cranberry morpheme. On the topic of cranberries, let's look at the etymology of this word, since they're a food almost synonymous with Christmas. The term cranberry morpheme, as mentioned, describes a morpheme, or a word element, that doesn't carry a meaning, but still distinguishes words from one another, like the rain in reindeer or the cran in cranberry. As in the previous example, however, the secret is in the etymology. While this morpheme may not mean anything now, it did in the past. The word first entered American English sometime in the 1640s, from the Low German cranberry, a compound of beere, berry, and kran, crane, as in the bird. A couple of centuries after its emergence in American English, the word spread to Britain, where the berries were previously called fenbreeze, or a number of other dialectal terms. The word berry, along with its Low German cognate, have roots in Proto-Germanic bosion, from an unknown source. Crane, however, can be traced back through Old English and Proto-Germanic to the Proto-Indo-European root ger, to cry out. Similar words for the animal appear in many languages of Eurasia, from Kartvelian and Sumerian to Uralic languages, although these are likely surface similarities due to onomatopoeia. You may know the word nativity as a play put on at Christmas, usually by children. It's also used to describe the little scenes showing the baby Jesus in the stable, and the festival of Christmas, as the celebration of Jesus' birth. It originally referred just to the birth of Jesus, or in fact anyone, coming from the Latin word nativitas, meaning Christmas, or literally birth. This is derived from the word nativus, born, created, innate or natural, ultimately from the verb nascor, to be born. This came from the Proto-Indo-European root gent, to produce or to give birth. This root is found in a huge number of modern words, such as king, gentle, general, pregnant, and oxygen. The time leading up to Christmas, from the 1st of December, or technically the closest Sunday, to Christmas Eve, is known as Advent. This word is also used in English simply to mean onset or beginning. It was borrowed from the Latin adventus, arrival or approach, from the verb advenire, to arrive. This is a form of the verb venire, to come, prefixed with ad, towards. Venire is from the Proto-Indo-European root gwem, to step, also the source of English come. Advent calendars can contain any sort of thing, but the most common is probably chocolate. Chocolate is something which seems to have taken over several holidays, namely Christmas and Easter, but it isn't particularly traditional. In fact, it was in the 16th century that the cocoa bean was first brought to Europe from the Americas, and not until the 19th century that solid chocolate was invented. The name of chocolate, too, was brought from the New World by the Spanish. It comes from classical Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs, as chocolate, thought to mean bitter water, from the words xocuc, sour, and ach, water, the latter ultimately from the Proto-Uto-Aztecan pa, of the same meaning. Probably the most Christmassy plant is holly. It's been used in winter festivals since long before Christmas came about, likely due to it being an evergreen, and because of its bright, blood-red berries. The word comes from Old English hollin, from an earlier Germanic word of unknown origin, but perhaps related to Proto-Celtic kollinos, which gave, for example, Welsh celyn. Mistletoe is a word with a clearer origin. It's from the Old English misteltarn, a compound of mistel, mistletoe, and tarn, twig, composed of the same elements as the cognate Old Norse word which may have influenced it. The second element is not related to the word toe, but rather was confused with it in the word's history. The first element is common in Germanic languages, coming from Proto-Germanic mistilos, a compounded form of Proto-Indo-European me, in the middle of, and a reduced form of the root sed, to sit. Therefore, that which sits in the middle, referring to how the plant lives in the branches of other trees. Snow is a word we can trace right back to the Proto-Indo-European snoigos, from the root sneigo, relating to snow. It came straight down through Proto-Germanic snøiwas and Old English snau, and is cognate to German Schnee, Swedish snö, and Russian sniek. The root also gave the Latin nix and the rare English word snew, meaning to snow. A carol is a usually religious song sung at Christmas. Historically, it referred to a type of ring dance and the music which accompanied it. The word comes from Old French carole, from a medieval form of the Latin word choraules, meaning the flautist who accompanies the carol dance, from an ancient Greek compound of choros, meaning ring dance, and aulos, flute. This etymology seems most likely, but another theory suggests the Latin corolla, diminutive of corona, crown or wreath, in reference to the circular dance. Finally, we come to angel. This comes through Old English engel, from Latin angelus. This is from the ancient Greek angelos, messenger, perhaps from either a Semitic or a substrate language. The sense of Christian spirit is a semantic loan from Biblical Hebrew malach, of the same meaning. And with that, I've gone through the origins of some common Christmas-related words. Let me know which you found most interesting. Thank you for watching.